Good evening and welcome to the LaRouche Organization Weekly Battle Report. Today is Wednesday, April 9th. I'm Michelle Erin, your host. Today is the 80th anniversary of the execution of Dietrich Bonhoffer, one of the most strong spiritual leaders of the anti-Hitler resistance. He was executed at the Flossenburg concentration camp on April 9th, 1945. As we take strength from those who come before us, let us listen to a few words from him. Optimism is not, in essence, a view of the present situation, but it is the vital force, a force of hope where others resign, a force to hold your head high when everything seems to fail, a force to endure setbacks, a force that never leaves the future to the opponent but claims it for itself. There is certainly also a foolish, cowardly optimism that must be condemned, but no one should look down on optimism as a will to the future, even if it is mistaken 100 times. It is the health of life, which the sick should not infect. We jump in now to our reports, starting with the founder of the Schiller Institute, Mrs. Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Mrs. Zepp-LaRouche has enlisted a group of high-level American retired military intelligence and diplomatic experts to intervene in Europe. This morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, she conducted a dialogue with former U.S. Ambassador to the Soviet Union, Jacques Matlock. A career Foreign Service officer, Ambassador Matlock was personally witness to the Gorbachev-Baker agreement to the Soviet Union that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. Topics of their discussion include the tariff policy of Trump, the potential for peace among the US, Russia, and China, the role of the British Empire, and how can we provoke Europeans and Americans to shake off their current modes of action and become their better selves. Here are a couple of short clips.
My biggest concern is that, you just can't do things like bullying all over the world, pushing people, I mean, it may be Trump's famous style, but I think the proper way to have done it would have been to call in a big international economic conference, like a New Bretton Woods conference, and then, discuss the principles of how this reorganization should be done, and then put the details to task force and expert groups and work it all out in a goodwill cooperation. But that doesn't seem to be what Trump is up to. What do you think?
No, that is definitely not Trump's style. And as I said, I think this is going to backfire. And about how soon he'll be forced to change, if he is forced to change, we simply don't know. So I think there are a lot of uncertainties ahead. And but certainly his style is one to shake things up and to show that he's the one in charge. He is clearly an authoritarian type leader. And because of our, I would say, very convoluted politics over the last, actually, decade or more in the United States, he did win the election. But the fact is that neither of our political parties gave us a candidate who was dedicated to peace. And I think that peace is important for us and for the entire world.
So I think we have never seen a world picture, at least in my lifetime, which was so, complicated and fraught with hopes and dangers. But, don't you think that Trump should be encouraged to go ahead with this peace with Russia? Because I think that is the most important element in the whole picture.
Yes, I do think it's very important for Europe and the United States, and most of all Ukraine, that there be an end to this war and a settlement that will bring some stability. And I think the increasing armaments in Western Europe are almost tragic, and because they're, first of all, unnecessary. Russia does not threaten the countries that are now in NATO. And the problem has been we have been treating a very, I would say, unrepresentative government in Ukraine as if it were a NATO member, which has been a red line for Russia for decades. Now, and yet what we have done in bringing arms in, we and our European allies, and is the most we would be required to do if they were a NATO member. And the Russian leader has been making it clear for over 20 years that there's an absolute red line in bringing Western armaments into Ukraine, or I would say Belarus. Frankly, we should understand that, because our own countries, particularly the United States, would not tolerate armed bases on countries next to it, Mexico or Canada or in the Caribbean, but armed by some foreign power. So I think that to say that the war in Ukraine was unprovoked is simply a misrepresentation of the facts.
Their full, very insightful discussion is available on the Schiller Institute website. Now, the LaRouche movement shaped, participated in, and intervened at many of the demonstrations that took place around the world this weekend. We'll start in Manhattan, where TLO President Diane Sare, I, and several others participated in a rally of 300 to 400 people outside the United Nations, demonstrating for an end to genocide in Gaza. We'll have a short report from me and then some insights from Diane. Hello, this is Michelle Erin out near the United Nations at a very spirited rally to end the genocide in Gaza.
Bibi Netanyahu is in Washington, D.C. today meeting with President Donald Trump, but for some reason the press conference was canceled. We don't know why. I'm Diane Sare, president of the LaRouche organization, former independent candidate for U.S. Senate. The United States is complicit in genocide, which has been escalating since March 2nd, when Israel resumed its blockade and broke the ceasefire. The United States has to take a stand against this, and we absolutely must not have a war with Iran. We're handing out the statement that I wrote, "When Does Never Again Begin?" making the point that we are now 80 years after the Holocaust, after the Nuremberg tribunals, and you have the Israeli Defense Forces committing exactly the same kinds of atrocities that were committed by the Waffen-SS and others. This has to stop. Mankind has to grow up. I think people want to. The majority of the American people do not support this slaughter, and we need a plan.
It makes a huge difference to be there in person. And one of our DC organizers will mention that in a later report. Because we were there distributing that flyer you saw, we saw a couple of people standing and reading the full flyer front and back. I also saw an interaction where Diane was handing out her latest flyer, and a young guy took the flyer, looked at it, he says, "Oh, this is LaRouche." And then he looks up at Diane and he says, You're Diane. I watch your shows." And he was so excited to meet her in person, a real person, not just talking head, but out there and organizing. So definitely get out there and organize. We now go to Sweden. On Friday, Ulf Sandmark of the Schiller Institute Sweden gave a speech at a rally of the Palestinian protesters at Odenplan Plaza in Stockholm. You see in the rally footage 15 people wearing health worker clothing as the demonstration drew attention with this street theater to the horrible executions by the IDF in Gaza of 15 Palestinian medics last month. In his beautiful speech, Ulf gave the briefing of the stark strategic picture, but he also laid out the way out with the Egyptian plan for Gaza, the LaRouche Oasis plan for development for the Middle East, and the Schiller Institute vision for development of the world. He said, Sweden must support peace and development, not wars. You can find Ulf's full speech with English transcript on his Facebook page, Ulf Sandmark, and we include the link to that in our YouTube description. Now we will go to France. On Saturday, the president of the Solidarity and Progress Party and former French presidential candidate Jacques Cheminade spoke to great appreciation and applause at a rally for sovereignty in Paris. Jacques spoke against rearmament of France and Europe against Russia. He said the enemy is those trying to make money at the expense of France, and that the world needs a true architecture of security and mutual development in cooperation with the global majority. Jacques challenged the audience to fight to restore France's sovereignty, its role as a republic, and to recognize that to say this is impossible would not be French. Jacques' full speech, titled, Macron wants us to attack a false enemy with money we don't have, is available on the YouTube channel of Solidarité et Progrès, and we include a link to that in our YouTube description. Now to Washington, D.C. in the United States, where the LaRouche organization participated Saturday in the Washington, D.C. National March for Palestine, Ceasefire Now, Stop the War on Gaza rally. In a crowd of many thousands of people from around the country, the LaRouche organization distributed 700 copies of that new statement by TLO President Diane Sare, When Does Never Again Begin?, which statement conveys that the genocide must end, war with Iran must be avoided, and that the LaRouche Oasis Plan gives a solution for Middle East peace. Let's hear from our organizers.
With a delegation of organizers from the LaRouche organization, the Schiller Institute, an important rally in Washington, D.C., Saturday, April 5th. It is a rally in defense of the Palestinian people being massacred, slaughtered by the Israeli Zionist fanatics. We are here in solidarity and to get out a very important message that was released yesterday evening by the president of the LaRouche organization. When does never again begin? And one of the very important messages we're adding, that's the subhead here, war with Iran must be avoided. They were finding a great receptivity to what we're getting out here. It's a spirited rally. People here from all over, and I'd like to have other people from our organizing team here pick up some of the themes of what we're expressing.
Yeah, hi, this is Mike Reeves from Baltimore. We're also here defending the right to free speech in our Constitution. Remember that the rights that are in our Constitution and Declaration of Independence aren't given to us by those documents. They are statements of universal natural rights that are given to us by our Creator. And that includes the rights of foreign students to protest this genocide. They should not be being arrested. They should not be being deported. That is a affront to the basic rights enshrined in our founding documents.
My name is Alex Getacho, and I'm very glad to be out here supporting what my colleagues here have stated. And it's important to understand how difficult and grave the situation is. It's one of the things that I just witnessed is I saw a long procession of small shoes. It looks like it's about a mile long that represents the Palestinian children that have been massacred here. This is something that history will remember, and how it remembers it depends on the outcome of this moment. And I'm glad to be here.
I'm Joe Billington, campaigning for peace and development. Netanyahu belongs in jail, that's for sure. In fact, history will record Netanyahu's name right alongside Adolf Hitler and others. We need peace and development, one human race. The Israelis, Palestinians can work together around the common aim for mankind. We've got to triple the production of food in the Middle East by producing a lot of fresh water out of the Mediterranean by power plants.
That would be LaRouche's Oasis plan, and that is what we're bringing in terms of a special palm card that is a breath of life for a lot of very despairing people who recognize the horror of what is going on but don't see a way out.
I'd like to add that rather than exporting weapons, we could be taking the facilities which produce these weapons and retool them to rebuild U.S. industrial capacity, build infrastructure to put millions of Americans to work, lifting our people and the rest of the world out of poverty. That would be a far better use of our shrinking industrial capacity, which we need to rebuild, expand, and put millions of people to work, and address the economic concerns that are driving people to desperation in the American public.
The LaRouche organization is known internationally as a source of credible strategic insight. On Saturday, President of the LaRouche organization, Diane Sare, was asked by RT's streaming news service to give her input into the hands-off demonstrations that had tens of thousands of people take to the streets in many cities across the United States for their opposition to Trump administration budget cuts.
All right, we can cross now to Diane Sare, president of the LaRouche organization and former independent candidate for U.S. Senate. Diane, great to have you on the program with us. As we saw there, thousands of people are taking to the streets across the U.S. in angry protests over the Trump economic agenda. What impact do you think this hands-off movement will have on the president and his policies?
None. I think it won't have any impact.
Trump's approach to international trade, it really contradicts what has been a decades-long globalist agenda in the U.S., with the president repeatedly promising to put America's interests first. How challenging do you think his actions will actually be to those principles?
Well, I think the problem we have here is two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, these people protesting, the conditions of life in the United States are very hard for people who are not multimillionaires and billionaires. But you look at the people speaking at these rallies, the one in D.C., I just happened to catch a bit of the live stream with Congressman Jamie Raskin with his little Ukraine and American flag lapel. He himself is a millionaire. The Congress has no touch with what's been going on in the population. We spend more money per capita on health, so-called health care, than any advanced sector nation, and the quality of care is terrible. It hasn't gotten worse in the 2.5 months that President Trump has been in office. He's not looted Social Security that I'm aware of, nor I'm not sure that he's particularly threatening Medicaid. He did cut a lot of waste out of USAID for overthrowing governments abroad. So these people, they are right in terms of the sense that the average middle class American is suffering, but the policies weren't caused by Trump. Sadly, the things that he is doing are not particularly going to help the situation.
Now, organizers in Texas attended a rally that was generally a hands-off protest on Saturday at the City Hall. It was attended by about 6,000 people, including a women's voter group, young socialists, and Veterans for Peace. Our guys featured a brilliantly hued banner that they had made that says, President Trump, don't bomb Iran. It's a British trap, and they have the White House phone number. They're directing people to make calls, and they distributed flyers and talked to many people. Let's hear from them on some of what they had to say. We're going to start with Betty Jennings.
Well, there's a rally here that a lot of people are very unhappy with some of the measures that have been taken by President Trump, and we're asking these people, whatever the issue is that they are upset about, is to direct it, their calls to the White House comment line and demand the President of the United States commit himself to his pledge to stop World War III and stop the forever wars. That means no bombing of Iran, no bombing of Yemen, and no letting Netanyahu off the hook on the ceasefire. They're killing more and more women and children, innocents who are unarmed, who are helpless.
Okay, and we're here in Houston, Texas, with the Schiller Institute. You can see our banner here. It says, President Trump, don't bomb Iran. It's a British trap, okay? A trap to make any possibility of peace in Gaza, Palestine, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, impossible. It would create a radioactive mess over in that part of the world that could rupture and bring down the dollar system itself. So our movement is very much involved in the process that gave life to the BRICS Alliance for World Development. And that's what the U.S. needs. Peaceful cooperation with the BRICS. Don't die for global NATO and drug wars. So thank you very much. Signing off from Houston, Texas.
On Friday, they took their beautiful banner during prime rush hour traffic to the Highway 59 at Montrose and hung the banner so that the drivers could see this. And this is something that everyone watching, most people watching, can do. Find a local highway overpass, make a banner, or a busy but safe driving intersection and set up and go out with these signs and banners. And when you do, please send pictures and videos to info@laroucheorganization.com. Now to a battle over ideas in France, where on Saturday, the president of the Solidarity and Progress Party, who we heard from earlier, Jacques Cheminade, participated in a 5-hour debate on the question, what is money? The debate took place in the countryside near Bordeaux in the south. Attendees, there were over 200 by the time this got into its peak swing from small villages and cities. Jacques was discussing his ideas, learned from Lyndon LaRouche, of physical economy, as opposed to money, which is stupid. And a lot of our literature was purchased at the book table. People wanted to learn more. People in the countryside in France, though perhaps not yet in the big cities, want to go back to physical economy. So we're going to have a short report from Sebastien and then a brief section of the debate.
Hi, everybody. This is Sebastien from France. I am here at Gradignan in close to Bordeaux, where we have a debate with Jacques Cheminade and also Etienne Chouard, which is a citizen very committed on question of democracy, and also Valérie Bugeaud, who is an author, somebody who's writing a lot on question of money and against the British Empire and stuff like that. So we have a debate here with Jacques Cheminade in France. With all the collective, we have 100 people here today, and we're selling our literature, and the debate is on the question of money and sovereignty. A real good action. We have a lot of contacts we are making and debating on this question of sovereignty and money and the physical economy. So that is what we're doing today in Gradignan close to Bordeaux in the southwest of France, and have fun. We keep organizing for the future. So have fun.
Pour mettre pouvoir d'investissement, c'est la nature de l'investissement qui compte. Parce qu'en monnaie, en monnaie, tu investis sur les moulins à vent, qu'on appelle aujourd'hui les éoliennes. Tu investis sur ça. La densité d'énergie par unité de surface et par matière apportée est très inférieure.
Thank you, Sebastien. Now, you don't need to wait for a big rally to go out and talk to people. Let's take a couple of organizing reports. First, Germany. Last week, Werner Zuse with the Schiller Institute and Civil Rights Solidarity Movement set up signs and a literature table in the beautiful town of Memmingen in Bavaria, Germany, to activate these citizens against the war policy of the German government. He told his fellow German citizens that they should obey not BlackRock, of which the new Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, used to serve on the board, but their own constitution.
Zuse. I'm with the Schiller Institute and the Civil Rights Movement Solidarity here in Bavaria. We are here today in Memmingen, a city close to the Alps, to activate the population that they do something to stop the war policy of our government. At the beginning of this year, there were elections in Germany and people voted against the so-called streetlight coalition because the defense minister at that time, Pistorius, demanded that Germany should be war ready until 2029. So they voted against this policy. Now we get a new government, and the problem is that the probable next chancellor in Germany will be Friedrich Merz, who was a high official of BlackRock. And by this, Germany will be run by BlackRock and is not sovereign anymore. We demand that the people tell their politicians that they have to obey our constitution, which is called Grundgesetz. In the preamble is the following, which I read now. Conscious of his responsibility before God and man, inspired by the will to serve the peace of the world as an equal member in a united Europe, the German people have given themselves this basic law by virtue of their constituent power. This is the preamble, and this calls that Germany should stand for peace and not for war. As we have real bad media, and the people are here brainwashed by propaganda which is run out of the city of London, people don't know that there is an alternative to the war policy of NATO. This is the policy of the BRICS nations. BRICS is an economic alliance and not a military alliance. We want to be part of BRICS, and we tell people that BRICS is the only chance for Germany to solve their economic problems. It's not by war economy, but by being part of the BRICS. Right now, our economy is collapsing. And with the customs of President Trump and our sanctions against many nations like Russia, like Iran and others, our market gets smaller and smaller for our exports. Therefore, we have to change this and collaborate with the BRICS. By this, our youth gets a future, we get again a growing economy, and we make friends in the world and not only enemies, because human future should be to love each other and not to hate each other. Thank you.
Werner's full speech in Memmingen, titled Defend the Constitution Like the Peasants Did in 1525, is available on his YouTube channel, Werner Zuse, and we include the link in our YouTube description. Our last report, though we are doing much more than what you're seeing here, is from Long Island, New York, where last Friday, LaRouche organizers were featuring the LaRouche Organization white paper, Will the British Decapitate the U.S. Presidency Before Independence Day? We'll hear from Art Murphy.
the LaRouche organization, we're campaigning here in Long Island. We're getting a lot of people engaged in the discussion about stopping this British decapitation of the presidency before Independence Day. Many people aren't very aware of the British role in this thing, but we're bringing up the issue of Sir Richard Dearlove and how he lied to get us into the Iraq War, how he wants to get us into this war in Iran. And it's all about attempting to sabotage Trump's attempt to get a peace with Russia and China. And of course, today happens to be the day we had of the assassination of Martin Luther King. And also we had the hearings beginning on the Kennedy assassination, which is opening up a lot of the key angles on this deep state apparatus we're fighting against. We're getting people who are retired machinists, people who work for the railroads, signing up with us, as well as others, people who are housewives and others. But we're focusing on how we can get the actual American system back, how Trump needs to focus on actually rebuilding the physical economy the way LaRouche called for, with the national bank, reviving the Glass-Steagall law. I just met a lady who was when she was younger, helped people joining BlackRock when it was just a .com, and now she regrets everything she ever did. But anyway, this is the fight to cancel the British Empire, cancel the Wall Street bailouts, get the United States back to the industrial base of the nation, and finally finish the American Revolution.
We just saw reports of participation this week of the LaRouche movement at major demonstrations around the world, including Manhattan, Stockholm, Paris, Washington, D.C., and Texas. We also saw other organizing, the work between Helga Zepp-LaRouche and retired diplomats and military figures who want to create the good. Educational work, as with Jacques Cheminade's 5-hour debate on money versus real economy, and other independent organizing activity taking place in Germany and the United States. So we leave this report with increased courage and optimism. You are encouraged to go out and organize. Send your battle reports to info@laroucheorganization.com, and we will see you next week.